Taking Flight by Neon Zangetsu, Chapter 10, The Seventh Fracture. You're gonna die, Salem. Maybe not this year, maybe not the next. Hell, maybe not even 10 years from now, but you will. I've seen it, I've lived it, I've already caused it. Ain't no stopping this train now, bitch. Future, the seventh fracture. Lilac eyes fluttered open with a start. Yang blinked once, yawned, stretched beneath silken sheets. All right then, she sighed at the ceiling. Guess I live to die another day. As ever, the whirling fan above held no answer for her. It seldom did, and so she sat up, winced a little as her joints protested. Stop that, body. You're not that old, and then slung herself out of bed. Bare feet padded against the warm black carpet of her apartment. A pale hand snatched up her prosthetic arm and hooked it into the slot at her elbow. From there, she fumbled into white shirt as she made a beeline for the hall. She caught sight of herself in the mirror and winced at the bags beneath her eyes. Coffee and food first, soldier, she grumbled at the sleepy specter as much as her messy hair. And then shower. There comes a time in a warrior's life when they look back on their choices. Everyone reflects upon their actions and their mistakes. Did I do the right thing? They wonder. Should I have changed this instead of that? Was it right for me to save him instead of her? Can I save everyone? Should I try at all? Maybe they should all just. Questions like that nod at you, like dying of 1,000 cuts. They'll bleed you dry if you let them. Yang was no exception to this age-old field. She was simply better at hiding in them most. She'd had years to practice, meddling with the past, altering the present, destroying the future. She felt guilt for each action she made. Every day, every morning she woke up and wondered if she'd seen her last sunrise, if she'd simply fade out of existence for what she'd done. It wasn't a matter of choice on her part, but rather consequences of her actions. The flow of time was a delicate thing, and the universe didn't like its peas mixed with its porridge. If one were to stand by and do nothing, the past would repeat. If she had let things be, let fate run its course. No. Unacceptable. Dad would die. Mom would probably run. Ruby would die. Blake would die. Weiss would die. John, Nora, Pyrrha, Ren, and not just them, everyone. Until she'd taken a risk. Better the devil you know than the one you don't. Salem would find new pawns in time, but that was just it. Time. In finding all those who might have served her. She delayed her, not for long, maybe only a decade or two, but it was enough. Time to train up a proper fighting force and take the battle to that crazy witch. Time enough to change everything, even if they never knew her, the real her. That was fine, so long as they lived. Yang gripped her wrist as she skidded down the steps and slid into the kitchen. She would fulfill her promise. She reached the kitchen and froze. You're awake! As ever, Yang felt a telltale tightness in her gut when she saw little Cinder in the kitchenette. Perched on the stool furthest from her, she watched her as timid a squirrel might a hungry tiger. Anger sparked, and for a moment Yang saw that awful witch in her place, not the helpless wretch she'd taken in. She shook her head and banished the vision. In the future, Fall was a monster, a wretched witch responsible for so much pain and misery. But now, she wasn't even 10, 7 at a stretch. Looking at her now dulled that pain, and really, the grim shark onesie she wore did a great deal to make her less menacing. The girl loved her pajamas. Thinking on that helped, and slowly, gradually, that black pearl of anger melted in her chest. Morning, Squirt. Sleep well? Yes, a quiet voice answered, lisping only a little. Golden eyes regarded her intently, fearful, warily. I was bored. Read a little. Yang glanced back, noticing the picture book she had planted on the counter, and the distinct lack of food thereof. There were crumbs there, clumsily hidden. A loaf of bread was missing. A golden brow arched. And did you eat breakfast yet? Cinder's pale visage darkened with shame. No. Look, Yang palmed her face. I'm not gonna hurt you. I meant that when I took you out of that awful place. You're safe here. You don't have to steal food. Cinder lifted her chin. Of course she was wary. Anyone in their right mind would be. She'd only had her for 3 months. Trust wasn't something that could be forged so swiftly, least of all for someone like this. Really, Yang knew she had no one but herself to blame. She'd sworn to undercut Salem at every turn, and when the chance came, She'd seen the opportunity, taken it. Jin had told her all she needed to know, and she'd used the knowledge ruthlessly since. And Tyrion would never worship her as a goddess. Hazel never lost his sister. Watts, well, she hadn't been able to find him yet, or Emerald's partner yet, but she was certain she would in time. Jin was never wrong. They just weren't where they were meant to be. Yet, Mercury would never be born to an abusive father, and Cinder, the awful Cinder Fall, the bane of Remnant, responsible for so much death, so much terror, was just a child. Not yet the monster maiden Atlas, not that horrible betrayed girl who'd been beaten until she broke. The faint growl of a small stomach pervaded the kitchen. Still hungry? Cinder nodded. Yes. Ah, Yang held up a finger. Manners. Now what do you say? Grave golden eyes rose to regard hers. Please, may I have some more? Yang nearly swayed on her feet. Irk. Must not squeal, adorable or not, this child has still her mortal and had this child had still been her mortal enemy once. Good girl, she said at last. Tell you what, how about I whip us up some eggs, just the way you like 'em? Eggs! A thin line of drool trailed from the corner of Cinder's mouth, forgotten in her glee. With extra bacon and chicken nuggets? Meat lover, this one. Sure, why not? She patted her daughter's head, caressing her dark hair fondly. Come on up here and I'll show you how to make an omelet. Cinder all but hauled us stood to the stove and perched up it like a raven, amber eyes fixed on the stove. Yang tried not to smile. She really did. Time was a rare and precious commodity for a woman out of time, and she didn't know how much she had left. Really, she knew she shouldn't be wasting hers on such menial things, but surely a little bit of kindness here and there wouldn't hurt. If it changed the future even a little, then she considered it well spent, even if it cost her soul. Her scroll rang while they made breakfast. A mere glance brightened her morning tenfold. Yang stabbed it with a thumb, setting it to speaker mode. Maria, buddy, pal. Her grin was practically feral. Right on time. I need a favor. You're mad. A card came and went. Narter quirked a golden brow. I think we've all established that, Glinda. Have we? His partner laid another card down on the table. Or have I simply failed to realize the depths of your deviousness? Raven flicked a card to match hers, drawing an aggravated growl from the blonde. Someone's a sore loser. I most assuredly am not. A rare spot of red hit her cheeks. This game is simply rigged. Technically, it isn't. Willow chimed, her soft voice echoing through the library. After all, the objective of Remnant is to conquer Remnant. That is to say, the board, by successfully acquiring control of all four kingdoms on the board map. And she gestured grandly to the forces arrayed between, eliciting a twitch from the bespectacled blonde. Starting with one region, a player navigates, attacks, and defends against other players who control one or more of the regions on the board using various strategic card-based actions. Willow, I understand that. The Schnee prattled right on, ignoring her. Each player controls and defends a wall, which protects their respective regions, and a conglomerate army for invading other players' walls. Raven is about to breach yours, by the way. Her words had grinding her teeth. And players also receive specific enchantment based on whichever part of Remnant they control, or their class, for that matter. Really, it's quite simple, she sniffed. You just have to listen. I pity your children, Willow. Raven's partner frowned as the jab sailed right over her head. Whatever for? You'll see. All right, Goldilocks. Raven overturned a card bearing the likeness of a snarling beast. They play White Fang Mercenaries. Now discard your hand and give me five cards from your graveyard. With a long-suffering sigh that promised bloody retribution, Glinda discarded her hand and watched as it was snatched up by her foe. Naruto ceded his turn and drew another card. Willow did the same, allowing Raven yet another turn. It wasn't wasted. Red eyes flashed as she summarily drew and laid down another card from her deck. I deploy Giant Nevermore, and I counter with Elysian Air Fleet. Willow cooed, revealing a face-down card of her own. Bye-bye, Birdie. No Grim Swarm for you. She moved her pieces forward. Now I'll just take this land. Traitor! All's fair in love and war. Naruto bit his lip and held back a smile. Say what you would about Sneeze, but they didn't like to lose. Well, that and they were vicious when it came to board games. Glinda had laid claim to Vale, while Willow had chosen the side of Atlas for herself, leaving Raven with Mistral and him Bakugo. Nobody liked Bakugo, just as well too, because with that move, Raven's forces had been split in half. My dark army! Raven buried her head in both hands. I was going to rule the world. Naruto considered his own hand with a frown. A small part of him considered quitting outright before he thought better of it. Really, the girls were getting into this. Best play it safe then. It was just a board game for crying out loud. Yet they were treating this like total war. He knew what was coming next. He'd be a fool not to. Glinda's legs nudged him beneath the table. You'll ally with me, won't you, Naruto? Nonsense. Willow hummed, he's going to help me. Bakugo has ever held strong ties with Atlas. Yeah, ages ago. Raven rolled her eyes. That shit doesn't count. Clearly he's going to help me. We're family, after all. Naruto gulped. I'm in danger, aren't I? And three pairs of eyes met his from opposite ends of the table, red, green, and blue. One angry, the other smug, and the final pleading. He couldn't help himself. He had to choose between them. That was just how war worked. Anyone who wasn't any ally inevitably became an enemy. That was how war worked. Or was it? An idea dawned, and Naruto slid the card across the table, followed by the pieces behind it. Willow made a noise of confusion. You cannot be serious. You're talking all of us, Raven guffed. At once, you'll never survive. Agreed. Glinda frowned and adjusted her spectacles. This seems foolish, even for you. I find your lack of faith disturbing. He considered the cards in his hand, plus the one he laid on the table, then turned the latter over when Glinda made her move. Also, you just activated my trap card. I play Desert Raiders. What followed was an absolute disaster. For them, nobody cared about the Bakugo faction, but when played by a master, they were devastating, and he'd had nothing but time to practice in the tribe. Willow wilted first, Raven fell next, her forces already weakened due to a certain Sneeze sabotage. Glinda put up a fair fight, really she did, but it was a foregone conclusion. 9 turns later, he'd found himself on the verge of winning. Really, there was just something about him and the number 9. It just seemed to be a lucky number for him. Naruto stifled a small smile as he watched them squabble with one another, each blaming one another for their impending doom. His team, only a few weeks in, and already he'd become, what was the word? Comfortable? And there it was, which begged the question, did he want to go back? Back to the dirt, back to the beatings, back to the rough life without so much as a shred of happiness or comfort? Did they have to? Should they? He stole a glance over his shoulder and contemplated the matter further. Raven might very well want to someday. She'd taken the tribe's philosophy more than most, but in the end, the choice belonged to them. They were growing stronger every day. Soon enough, they'd be stronger than Silas. He wouldn't be able to force their compliance. He certainly couldn't find them if they didn't want to be found. Mistral and the tribe was another world away, and for years to grow stronger, to train, to help the innocent, to protect them, rather than prey upon them. Yes, the choice was theirs. He got Crow's gaze across the way and returned it with a rueful grin. There was no real hurry. They had 4 years, after all. What could possibly go wrong? You just had to say it. A hand clamped down on his shoulder, hauling him backwards in his chair. There was neither word nor warning for what came next. One moment he was contemplating the future, and the next someone hauled him back into the present. Azure pools fluttered in slow, lazy blink. Naruto looked up and focused himself, staring into a pair of startling silver eyes set in a dark face framed by chestnut brown hair. Really, she looked rather familiar. He tilted his head just so, not quite comprehending what the stranger wanted. Who was she? A teacher or something? She certainly looked old enough to be one. Yet the stern scowl of her face promised nothing short of murder. Raven saw it and surged upright, only for a sweep of a kick to send her sprawling into the others. Can I help you? Cheeky little thing, aren't you? Naruto's would-be killer glowered at him. Yes, you can. The young woman's scowl became a bloodthirsty grin. Prove yourself or die. His brow furrowed. I really don't see what I have to prove to someone like... Yeah, hey! A scythe slammed down at his face. He caught its blade edge in one hand. Blood bubbled between his fingers, and distantly, ever so distant, he heard someone shout, He stood slowly, dragging the hooked woman weapon up in one hand, rising to loom over his aggressor with his full towering height. Silver orbs widened up at him. Well, damn! She didn't tell me you could do that. Naruto growled, blue eyes flashed red. Then he moved. Clenched knuckles barreled into Maria's face and hurled her through a wall. All right, Miss Maria. He cracked his knuckles as he stalked out into the aperture after her. Just remember, you wanted this. Previews. And see, that's the thing. Yang snapped the fingers of her false arm. I don't have everything figured out. Hell, all my meddling just might erase me from existence, or it might not, but I'll be damned if I don't try. Then why go this far? Because my old man made me a promise before he sent me back. That, and here those lovely black eyes burn with flames. I'm a spiteful woman, Aspen. Salem took everything from me, so I'm going to take everything from her, and when she dies, when all her schemes crumble down around her, she'll know she has no one to blame but herself. She'll have lost the same little girl she mocked. She'll lost to the exact same little girl she mocked in the last life. When we meet, you asked me if this was personal. I said it wasn't. I lied. Crow flipped him the bird. Caw, motherfucker. Hey! You don't belong here, Willow. You're better than this ilk. Come back to Atlas. Is that so? She turned her nose up at him. And are you to say where I belong, Jackass? My life is my own. When the young man opened his mouth to protest, she thrust her blade into it, caressing the inside of his cheek with cold steel. One more word, and I'll carve you a smile you'll never forget. Raven frowned. Do you think we should... Nah, Naruto waved her down. She's got this. You think you're hot shit, don't you? Naruto turned his head and spat out a tooth. I'm going to remind you in advance that I'm very sorry and apologize for the inconvenience of me not giving a fuck about what you think. Serve me. Yeah, no, go shag a cactus. End of chapter 10. Taking Flight by Nyan Sangetsu. Chapter 11. The 8th Fracture. I've pretty much fucked the future. What about it? Where I see it, this ends one of two ways. Wanna know which I'm betting on? Yang. The 8th Fracture. You're smiling, Yang. Am I? She hid her smile behind her flask. Whatever gives you that idea. Aspen frowned. At least Yang assumed he did. It felt like he was frowning. He was a frowner. Even with her back to him, she could feel the immortal's gaze drilling into her shoulders. Silly Aspen. If a stern glare was enough to mollify her, she wouldn't have come to the past in the first place. Still, she made a point of not looking at him as she watched the chaos unfold below their tower. Old habits died hard. Oz might not be Oscar yet in this timeline, but it was all too easy to see him as such. All too easy to remember his body beaten and broken at Salem's hands with all the others. Whoops, there was the depression rearing its ugly head again. Nothing a little alcohol couldn't solve. She took another drink and sighed as the whiskey warmed her belly. Osmond tried to speak, only to be silenced by a raised finger. Very well, keep your secrets. Meanwhile, her erstwhile ally slumped behind his desk. But at least allow me to guess. This wouldn't have anything to do with the commotion Miss Calavera has been causing now, would it? Another swing came and went. No. Yang. Here at last she turned to look at the headmaster, just in time to see him steeple his fingers and lay his chin atop them. She's been at this for a week. Of course she is. I told her to do it. She hummed happily to herself as the Grim Reaper crashed out a window, caught herself on a nearby ledge, and hurtled back inside. At least his reaction time's getting better. He can actually fight her on even ground now. I need Maria to investigate those murders, not run pell-mell through the halls harassing unsuspecting students. Well, she took another long draught from her dental flask, Uncle Crow's flask, and traced the worn metal as she considered her response. I wouldn't call it harassment per se. Think of it as intensive training. A distant blast rattled the world, accompanied by a low roar. Yin! Aspen frowned. That sounds like Naruto. Yep, yet a third sip followed. He's the key to all this. Gotta make sure he grows up big and strong. His brow knit together. You do seem rather fixated on him and Miss Branwen. A bit of sweat ran down her brow. Deny. Don't mention Mom and Dad. It's not the combination I hoped for. She swallowed her thoughts, but it works, so long as they become strong. She wrinkled her nose as the weight of her words caught up to her. Ugh, now she sounded like Raven. Mom would be laughing her ass off right about now. See, that's the thing. Yang snapped the finger off her false arm. I don't have everything figured out. Hell, all my meddling might erase me from existence, or it might not. But I'll be damned if I don't try. And she had to, she must. My family gave everything to give us this second chance. Then why go this far? Because my old man made me promise before he sent me back that. And here those are like like eyes burned with flames. I'm a spitfire, spiteful woman, Ospen. Anger coiled in her heart like a bitter serpent, working her thoughts once more. Salem took everything from me, so I'm going to take everything from her in turn. She stowed her flask and stepped forward, looming larger over him. And when she finally dies, the words escaped her in a feral hiss. When all her precious pawns are gone and her sly schemes crumble down around her ears, she'll know she has no one to blame but herself. She'll have lost to the same little girl she mocked in the last life. She beamed. When we met, you asked me if this was personal. I said it wasn't. I lied. Another explosion rattled the school below. Yang whirled and looked towards the window, frowned. Wait a minute. Isn't that? Maria Calavera fought like her namesake. For every injury Naruto dealt her, the Grim Reaper dished out two more. Life and death were a whirl of motion around her, a storm of steel that tore through his defenses like paper, or they would have if he'd bothered to defend himself. One did not simply defend themselves against Maria. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. You attacked, or got attacked in turn. Ata! A snarl tore out of him as he lashed out and up, kicking her away. Stop already! Let me enjoy my lunch in peace! No dice. She came tearing right back in, grinning from ear to ear. He supposed she was enjoying herself. He wasn't. She'd been abusing them for the better part of a week now, and frankly, he'd grown sick of it. Yes, he'd grown faster and stronger for her constant attacks. His instinct sharpened, reflexes honed to a sharper edge. But with each successive strike, his patience waned. You think you're hot shit, don't you? Naruto turned his head and spat out a tooth. I'm going to remind you in advance, he grunted as he took her rightmost scythe to the shoulder and left it there. I'm very sorry and apologize for the inconvenience of me not giving a fuck. His voice twisted, ripping it from her grasp. And what you think? About what you think? This time, he disarmed her first and struck again, a low sweep that ripped her left scythe away, followed by a shoulder barge that pushed her towards yet another window. She ripped prophecy from his grasp as she went, but he wouldn't be denied. He caught her in a fully body tackle, grabbed her by the cloak, whirled and flung her through the glass. Miss Calavera crashed out of the window, performed a graceful backflip in mid-air. For a moment, she almost seemed to hang there, defying gravity itself. Crap, and sank like a stone. A strangled squawk came from the courtyard below. I say! Naruto peeked out over the window. That didn't sound like Miss Maria. Raven's head poked over his shoulder. Suppose it's too much to hope she died. Willow slapped her arms. Don't be rude. Fine. In short order, Team Crown scrambled down over Beacon's after Beacon's resident psychopath. Their concern was for naught. They found her sitting atop a dazed young man, the latter of which lay sprawled down in the courtyard, eyes spinning in his head. She looked every bit at her ease, stretching languidly atop him. Thanks for breaking my fall, kiddo. Mary reached down to pat his cheek. Striking silver eyes swept back to them as she climbed back to her feet. Same time next week, brats. Try to last a little longer this time. I'll last longer if you stop ambushing me like that. Give up already. Not a chance. She sauntered away with a sway at her hips. Glinda clamped her hand over Naruto's face. Don't look. I'm not. A low groan came from the poor sod she landed on top. A little help here. Naruto sighed. In the end, he took pity on him. Whatever debonair air the young man might have possessed was decidedly dashed by his disheveled state. His once glossy dark hair, was a tattered mess atop his head. His crisp suit now a crinkled mess. That pencil-thin mustache curling around his upper lip really didn't do him any favors. He looked like one of those posh Atlas types through and through. Didn't stop him from helping him up, though a hand clasped his and called him to his feet. My thanks you have for my timely rescue. There was a bouquet of rose red flowers miraculously untouched at his feet, somehow untrampled in the chaos. He picked himself up, dusting his clothes off as best he could, and straightened his spine with an audible crack. Aura flicked just so, cracking across his shoulders in a show of pale blue sparks. Small wonder he'd survived Maria's rough landing. Aura could take a fair bit. Willow jerked back like she'd been scalded. Jackass! Naruto turned, letting go of his hand as he did. Who now? Bereft of balance, the poor fellow fell face first into the muck all over again. He caught himself on an elbow and thrashed upright. Willow, is that you? She scowled at the young man in turn, keeping the three of them between him and her at all times. Why are you here? Why, I've come to rescue you, of course. Raven scoffed. Rescue, he says. Huh. This'll be good. Rescue me, Willow repeated the words aghast. From who? Before their very eyes, Gale snarled. From all this? That woman clearly seduced you. The lot of them blanched. Woman? You mean Yin? Willow softly and shook her head. Jackass, no, we've been over this. She's like a mother to me. She doesn't matter. You have responsibilities. Her brow turned thunderously. To you or the Schnee family. Jackass turned an alarming shade of puce at the slight. Your father has given me his blessing to be in Beacon. The hairs flicked her fingers, producing a glimmering glyph just over her nails. Unless he retracted that in the last few weeks, which I find highly unlikely, I don't much see the point in this. You know his health is poor. I do not care this. She snapped her fingers. For my responsibilities, this is my life. I will not be some trophy wife. Raven whistled. You tell him. No one says you should be such a thing. No. Her expression became icy indeed. The board of investors clearly seem to think otherwise. Or have you wooed them too? He looked away. That is an unrelated matter. Without you, the SDC cannot function. They have my father. Nicholas has run it quite well. He's run it into the ground. Here at last, he dropped the pretenses. Investors are leaving the company in droves. You don't belong here, Willow. You're better than these elk. Come back to Atlas. When she didn't falter in the face of his pleas, he tried anew. The SDC needs you. You belong there. Is that so? She turned her nose up at him. And you to know where I belong? Jackass, my life is my own. When the young man opened his mouth to protest, she thrust her blade into it, caressing the inside of his cheek with cold intent. But by all means, keep talking. One more word and I'll carve you a smile you won't forget. Naruto frowned. Do you think we should, Nah, Raven waved her down. She's got this. Besides, Willow whirled and latched onto his arm, startling him. I'm already spoken for. Willow, why do you do this? I've met someone. She pulled on, heedless of their thunderstruck expression. A man I wish to spend the rest of my life with. A blonde brow rose. First, I've heard of this. Jackass appeared to be of a similar mind. So soon? Raven all but spat sparks. We wanted to keep it secret. Willow turned a pleading look upon him. Isn't that right? She seemed to physically struggle with the words for a moment. Darling. Wait, was she? Oh! Realization broke like the dawn, bringing glorious clarity. Willow wanted nothing to do with Jackass, but nothing will dissuade him, not even force. So she'd sought another path. He just so happened to be standing squarely on it. If anyone else had been here, then she'd surely have latched onto them instead. Really, it was just bad, bloody luck. Damn him and his soft heart. Damn Crow and his semblance too. Blasted thing was contagious, right? He put on what he hoped was a winning smile and put a wary hand around her waist. She stiffened only a little. What she said, his lips twisted a little. "Milady is madly in love. Yep, that's us." Glinda slapped a hand to her forehead, not at all fooled by this ruse. Ah, but Jackass was. Naruto could see it in his face, the muscle jumping in his jaw, pulsing furiously alongside the vein in his temple. There it was, the telltale twitch of his eye, something that said more than words ever could. He'd seen that look in members of the tribe before, just as he'd seen what came next. Any moment now. "Him!" he sputtered, all but frothing at the mouth. "You! With this ruffian!" "Aha! There it was. I'll thank you not to speak of my intended that way." Jackass made a wheezing noise. "You mean to marry him?" Raven lunged forward. Glinda retreated her with her semblance. All the while, Naruto died a little on the inside. "This is what I get for helping. He looks like some kind of bandit." Oh, that accusation was a little too close for comfort. "What can you possibly see in him?" Must not speak. In the end, he didn't have to, because everyone took offense for him. Raven bowled forward. "Wanna say that again, bud?" Glinda stepped up beside her. "How dare you!" "The gall!" Faced with such a united front, Jackass faltered. He looked left, looked right, and found no allies. The few students that were out and about didn't bother to come to his aid. Why would they? In this timeline, he was only a man. Nothing. No one. He owned nothing, had nothing, and that was his folly. His gaze settled upon Willow with intent. "This isn't over." She scoffed and made a shooing motion. "I believe it is. Goodbye, Jackass." He bridled a little at that. The very moment he did, Naruto wrinkled free of Willow and stepped forward. Glinda and Raven did the same, effectively flanking him while keeping their sassy Schnee firmly behind them. Say what you would about the woman and her machinations, but she was still his teammate. If this little worm wanted to strike her, he'd have to go through them. "Go on," he growled. "Make our day." No such luck. The man muttered a curse and stalked off. The very moment he was gone, Willow found herself skewered by 3 angry glares. "Well," Linda planted a hand on her hip. "Care to explain yourself?" "I'm sorry." The Schnee heaved a sigh and hung up her hands with a cry. "I panicked, and really, it's just for a little while." She stole a glance over her shoulders. "Jackass will give up eventually. He always does when things don't go his way." Naruto craned his neck past her towards the man's rapidly retreating back. Even from here, he could see his shoulders quivering with anger. He whirled and spared them a vicious look, eyes like twin chips of ice. His mouth moved, and from this distance, he couldn't hear what was said. Not all of it, just a single word. "Mine." That doesn't look like the face of a man who will give up easily. He grimaced as the gale stalked away. I can't pretend to be your whatever this is. Not forever." Willow looked up at him and clung to his arm. "Surely it wouldn't be that bad." "Oi, at least take me to dinner first." Raven imploded behind him. "Hands off! He's mine." Previews. Yang's head snapped to the side. She smiled, with a thin line of blood from her mouth. That all you got? Wake up!" Blue eyes opened, sapphire slits met with stark scarlet. The giant fox grinned at him. It was not a pleasant smile. "Well, it's about damn time." "Traitor!" No. Glinda shook her head fiercely. "I want no part of this madness. They're welcome to have him and be done with that." "You say that," Crow knocked his glance back, "but I see the way you look at him. Side madness is like luck. It finds you." His brow twitched a little as he considered the inebriated girl currently sitting on him. "Whether you like it or not." Summer hiccuped in his lap, utterly smashed. "Yep." For a wild, fleeting moment, he recalled that young blonde boy from the raid. And Tai raised a hand. "I have a question. Have we met?" Naruto whirled and walked the other way. End of chapter 11. Taking Flight by Nyan Zangetsu, chapter 12, The Ninth Fracture, Fragment. 999. There's something about him and the number 9. Oh, baby girl, you have no idea, but you will. Yang. The Ninth Fragment. Crow absolutely whooped with glee. "Ha! You're kidding me." "I wish I were." Glinda knocked her glass back with a snarl and slammed it down on the table hard enough to crack the wooden frame beneath. Somehow the glass survived while the table did not. She didn't know how, didn't much care for that matter either. She was entirely too sober for these shenanigans, hence the drinking, all the drinking. Why wasn't she drinking? Another, she demanded hotly. You sure about that? Students like us really shouldn't be having any in the first place. When the bemused Branwen continued to snigger, she lifted her crop in warning. Pour, or I will harm you. All right. Say what you would about Crow Branwen, but he was a good listener. He also knew when to shut up and knew when to pour. So, despite his laughter, his hand remained perfectly steady as he refilled her glass with his flask. Let me get this straight, just to be clear. This whole engagement thing little Miss Schnee was prattling on about, he crooked his finger at the aforementioned word. It's a hoax, right? She's not really, you know what I mean. It is not. Glinda snatched up her glass and knocked it back. Unfortunately, it left your sister quite cross. Understandable. Understatement of the century, that she wanted no part of that madness and had rightfully left the three of them to sort things out while she was away. They could tear a veil until they calmed down for all she cared. If she had been team leader, perhaps she would have tried harder to corral them, but since she wasn't, nope. Crow pulled a face as he leaned away from her. Whiskers bit off more than he could chew. Huh? Sounds like something he'd do. Across the room, Rumple looked up from her book. Crow, whatever you're thinking, don't. Wouldn't dream of it, Goldie. She gave him an evil-eyed look and returned to her reading. Let him go. Tai Yang uttered a jaw-popping yawn as he rolled over in his cot. Best to get it out of their system and all that. Not for the first time, Glinda tamped down a reflexive urge of anger. Blast these three. Blast them all. Beacon was supposed to be simple, and she'd been recruited by the best of the best, brought up on tales of fame and glory. She thought this academy would be the pinnacle of prestige, the hope of humanity, the one place where she could put her talents to good use. Miss Jenna had certainly made it seem so, but they were all mad, all of them, each and every one of them. He's your brother. She looked up away with a huff. You ask him. A funny thing that. A low chortle answered her. He really ain't. We're not related by blood. Glinda sensed a story there. Curiously reared up in her heart. No. She shook her head fiercely to stymie it. I want no part of this madness. They're welcome to have him and be done with that. You say that. Crow knocked his flask back. But I see the way you look at him. Size madness is luck. It finds you. His brow twisted a little as he considered the inebriated girl currently sitting on him. Whether you like it or not. Summer chirped from where she lay in his lap, utterly smashed. Yep. Crow leaned forward just so. Glinda found herself mirroring him. Let me tell you how we met. Previous. That's absurd. How did you dodge that many bullets? I didn't dodge them. Not a turd just so, revealing his bloody coat and the scarlet stains spreading across it. I resolved to take them from the start. A thin red line ran across his lips. Yet his expression never wavered, not for a second. To protect her. You fool, you'll die. This world will die. You'll all burn. Maybe, unlike you, I've got something called willpower. Blue eyes bled red. Something you know very little about. Also, his head shifted a fraction of an inch to the right as they unloaded again. A dust round lodged between his teeth, caught well short of its target. It shattered as he bit down. I have people to protect. Monster! He lumbered forward. His attacker recoiled and tried to fire again. His shot went high. I'll let you in a little secret. A clawed hand closed around his face. You see, there's a monster in all of us. Scarlet light bled from his stomach. Mine's real. His victim tried to speak, only to choke as scalding energy poured down their throat. Time to let the monster out. End of chapter 12.